Um, so at this point, I am going to pass over to Sam Herbert, who I think is the founder and the CEO of 67 Bricks. Uh, Nick touched on how do we maximize value from data? And I actually think looking at the work that 67 Bricks does, that kind of speaks directly to the work they do with publishers in the UK and around the world. I've been watching 67 Bricks and I was so excited when the team came to me and said they were actually able to persuade Sam to present. So no more from me. Sam, if you're ready, I'm just going to pass straight over to you.
Great. Can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yes, both.
Perfect. Today. We're not the first significant failure so far. Perfect. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Nick, for an excellent keynote. Yes, as John said, my name is Sam Herbert. I'm the co-founder of 67 Bricks. We're a full-service product development partner for content organizations, and we help those content organizations build information products fit for the new digital environment. Today, I'm going to be talking about the drivers for change in our industry and specifically why content organizations need to move from providing raw content assets to personalized digital products. So the first thing I think we need to say is that our world is changing, and Nick did a great job of covering that in some detail. Obviously, we are currently experiencing significant turmoil and change due to the coronavirus. I'm going to be focusing on the changes to our world driven by technology innovation, but I think it is interesting to note that the coronavirus is accelerating some of the changes we are already seeing. For example, university students going online in large numbers. So I've picked three main areas of technology innovation that I wanted to talk to you about that I think are driving this change. The first is data. So as an example, General Electric, they build jet engines. About 10 years ago, they were experiencing a problem that certain jet engines were failing far quicker than other jet engines, and they couldn't work out why. So they built a data team, and they started installing some measuring devices on those jet engines. And it turns out that it's those jet engines that are traveling through parts of the atmosphere that have more sand in them that were failing sooner. And that information and insight actually managed to save General Electric close to hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Step forward to today, and they have thousands or tens of thousands of measuring devices on every single jet engine, and they're generating about 20 terabytes of data every hour on every jet engine. That's more data than Twitter generates in a year per hour. They now have a new business area around data, which monitors and manages and gathers insights and develops insights across multiple kind of industrial machines, and that business is now larger than their jet engine business. The second area I think that's really changing our world is the speed of processors, or the speed of computers. So we've seen a 1 trillion-fold increase in the power of computers since 1950s. In the 1960s, we managed to land astronauts on the moon with a computer that was 100 times less powerful than a Nintendo Game Boy. Step forward to today, and we already have a supercomputer that has more processing power, more compute speed than the human brain, and 10 times as much data, and can store 10 times as much data. We follow this trend forward, and within a few years, we expect to have a single $1,000 desktop computer that will be as fast as the human brain. Continue that forward further to 2050, and we expect a $1,000 desktop computer to have more processing power than the entire human race. The third area of substantial change is in algorithms. And it's actually, I think, as Nick kind of touched on, it's not the writing of complex algorithms that's actually happening now, it's the implementation of them. Lots of these algorithms were written in the 70s and 80s, and it's only now that we have the data processing capabilities and the processing speed that we can these are now being applied in multiple areas of our lives and impacting many areas of our lives. One example of algorithm use is a test was done a few years ago to see how an AI would compare to doctors in identifying breast cancer. And it it turns out that an AI is better at identifying breast cancer from breast scans. More recently, Google is now claiming that it can identify metastatic breast cancer to a 99% accuracy. Now, it's metastatic cancer identification that's really hard for humans, and human experts can be as bad as only identifying 1 in 3 cases. So this is a substantial change. Slightly closer to home in our industry, Springer Nature published the first machine-generated book last year. We've also seen increases in AI-driven services like peer review recommendations, semi-automated editorial bots, content recommendations, bestseller predictions, automated book pricing engines, etc. So technology innovation is changing the landscape for all of us, and it's impacting many aspects of our lives. But what's the specific impact on the scholarly research communication? Well, the first one, and again, Nick touched on this excellently, which was around content overload. There is increasing quantities of content available, and there are multiple forms of the same content becoming available. This is not just in the form of traditional publishers, it's also in the form of non-traditional publishing. So everyone is getting in on the act. Everything from self-publishing to blogs, wikis, social media. The amount of content out there is massively increasing, and in an industry of in a content industry, we really need to take note of that. The second significant impact, I think, is changing user expectations. So the likes of Google, Amazon, and Facebook are determining how users expect to interact with companies, with people, with content, with information. And the third area is around distribution disruptors. So we are seeing the likes of Google Scholar and Sci-Hub dramatically change how users are finding content online. Publishers tell us that their usage behavior is going in the direction, and it is substantially in the form of single usage. So a person comes to the site, gets to the page they want to get to, downloads the piece of content and leaves again. And if publishers aren't terrified by that, then they absolutely should be, particularly if you combine that with essentially the commoditization of content from the first significant impact. So there's more content out there, and your content is no longer as important as it once was, and you're no longer involved in the process of how people find content. That should be significantly worrying, and is. So I think at this period in time, we have to recognize that things are changing, and we have to understand what is changing. We have to understand that there are things that previously appeared to be set in stone that have changed. For example, what the service or product is that we provide, how we deliver value to our users, who our competitors are. All of these are things that appear to be kind of predetermined or set in stone for many years, but are now not so. BMJ are one of the most credible providers of content in their domain, and even they are saying that the quality and credibility of their content is no longer all that matters. Its ease and speed of access are now just as important. And what I think we need to recognize, and what's really interesting, is we need to understand that change comes in the form of new user experiences. So for each of these organizations, they haven't actually changed the end outcome for the user. What they've changed is the experience of achieving that outcome. And that has dramatically changed their whole industries. So for example, Uber, the customer still travels from A to B, but it's the experience of getting from A to B that has dramatically changed. Google's early use cases were, for example, around finding company telephone numbers. Google, the user still had the same outcome. They had the telephone number at the end, but it was the experience of achieving that outcome that completely changed an industry. Again, with Amazon, their first use case was around selling books, delivering books. Again, the end user ended up with a book in their hands, but it was the experience of achieving that outcome that dramatically changed. So what we have to understand, and what we need to do, is we need to get better at understanding our users, what their goals are, what outcomes they are trying to achieve, and we need to get better at helping them achieve those outcomes. We need to ask ourselves, how, in this new mix of technology, content, and data, can we do this best? So we cannot stand still. Let's take a look at Kodak, a highly credible company, doing a great service. But the new Kodak moment is that moment when you realize that customer behaviors and preferences have changed so dramatically from your assumptions that it's too late to change. So I think we have, in our industries, and I really liked Nick's continually evolving graph about how change is continuing to happen, and this is our variation of this particular point in time. So we think that that our industry, and the scholarly communication industry, has successfully gone through the transformation from print to print online, and I think we'd all like to step back and pat ourselves on the back and be pleased with that. But essentially what we've done is we've replicated the formats and structures of the existing print model. This is essentially putting the raw content assets online, and that was important, and it met some specific needs at that time. But I think we've stalled, and the print online model is no longer delivering on those user expectations. We need to recognize that we need to go through a further phase of digital transformation, and as Nick said, there'll be further ones beyond that. But the current one I think we should be looking at is the evolution or the transformation from being a print online or provider to being a digital product organization. And what this forces us to do is it forces us to think about the services that you provide. How do you deliver value? What do your customers need and want? And that's what all product organizations do. And that's what I think we all need to do at this point in time. So I think there's another thing that's happening at the moment that we need to be aware of, and it's around the labels that we use. I think we need to rethink the labels that we use to describe ourselves. And I think that this is currently holding us back in our ability to really think about, well, who are our users and how do we deliver value to them? I like to compare this to a previous point in time at the arrival of the motor engine. Prior to that, you would have companies who were horse carriage companies. They built horse carriages. If they continued to call themselves horse carriage companies, then they were obviously significantly limiting their ability to think openly about, well, what do we need to do at this point in time, and how do we deliver the outcome that our end users want? And I think that I think it's a really interesting kind of process to go through to stop using the labels that we currently use. Decide for a week or 2 weeks or a period of time to stop using the words library or librarians or publishers or book or journal article. Remove those those labels that have heavy connotations around them, and to talk more generally about what we do and how we do it and who our users are and how we service them. And I think then we get to we're better able to rethink what is the opportunity for us. How do we reshape our libraries, or how do we reshape the functions that provide those libraries to deliver more value to our organizations and to the public? Unfortunately, otherwise, I think, like horse carriage companies, we potentially can become historical footnotes. So I would suggest it's time to evolve. We need to think about the skills, systems, and processes that allowed you to succeed in both the print and print online era are no longer necessarily the skill systems and processes that you need in the new digital environment. So this is what we call the digital product value pyramid. And as you move up the pyramid in terms of, and we're talking about here about digital products, but you could think about it in terms of your broader services that you provide. But here we're talking about, as you move up the value pyramid and delivering more value to your end users, reducing their effort, simplification, as John said, but also we need to talk about increasing our data maturity. So at the base level, we're essentially providing raw content assets. And if we do that, then we are competing on a level playing field with the likes of Google Scholar and Sci-Hub, and you know, they have they're likely to win in that competitive environment. But as we move up the value pyramid, so at the next level, we're talking about having more data about our content. So understanding your content. That's, you know, enrichment. It's understanding, you know, the drugs and diseases that are talked about in a particular piece of research. It's about understanding the particular relationships between two entities that are described. So basically getting more enriched data around your content. And that allows you to provide an improved search and discovery experience for your end users. At the next level, we talk about adding data around your users. So understanding what your users are interested in, understanding what they've already accessed, understanding what they've already published. And with that data, then providing a personalized search and discovery experience. Again, getting people closer to their solution with less effort. At the next level, we're actually talking about moving away from just providing the raw content assets, you know, the long form text, and actually extracting the knowledge that you store within your large content assets. Essentially telling people what has happened. So for example, these research areas are trending, or this institution has done this, has been doing research in these areas. These are the authors who have been doing research in that area, telling people what has happened. And then at the top of the pyramid, we talk about looking forward, actually using algorithms and AI to say, well, we have this large content asset, we can use it to predict what is going to happen. We can tell you, based on, you know, the large and huge quantity of data and content that we have, where we think new research is going to be a high impact. We can also start to be prescriptive and tell you what we think you should be doing and how you should be solving your particular problem. Alongside the product value pyramid, we have the kind of data maturity model. And what this talks about is that at each level of the product value pyramid, you need to have a different level of maturity around the management and storage of data. So we talk about storing and managing data, we talk about extracting and creating data, we're talking about data use, all with the aim of delivering more product value to your end users, getting closer to delivering their specific outcomes. I won't go into detail in any more detail in either of these, but if you want copies of these, then please do ask me for them. And so I'm really saying that, you know, in this new digital environment, that data is the thing that allows us to really deliver on those outcomes. And typically the primary data sources that we're seeing we need to work with are both user and content and research data. That's the primary data set we need typically for every you know, use case, every platform, every digital product. We talk about additional data sets. So you might want funder data, you might want institution data, you might want industry trending data to support specific use cases or specific, you know, end user requirements. And then we also need contextual data. So you may have the world's best weather prediction algorithm, but unless you know where that person is going to be tomorrow, you can't tell them what their weather is going to be like. So we need context data as well. So how do we pull this all together, and what does it actually mean for our end users? So this is Charles. He's an early stage researcher. He has completed his first piece of research. He is pleased that he got it published and is now thinking about what research to do next. Project information literacy research that I found has identified that the hardest part of research is getting started. Students also struggle with defining a topic, narrowing it down, and filtering what is relevant. So, armed with this insight, let's think about how we could deliver more value to Charles. With the current model of providing raw content assets, the process looks something like this. Charles will use various different routes to get hold of hundreds or thousands of research articles. He will review them to gather insights and pick up on trends. He'll ask other people what research should he be doing and what research should he be reading. He'll use various different sources, and Google and Sci-Hub may be one of the primary sources in terms of finding those pieces of research. But primarily for Charles, this is a heavily manual process. Now let's think about what's possible. We actually already know what Charles has published. We know what area of research he is interested in. We know what is trending and what is likely to be high impact in the coming years, because we have these large content assets and we can extract data from them. We know the research institutions doing research in these areas and the funders looking to fund in these areas. So let's consider a different user experience for Charles. Charles finishes and publishes. He's very happy. He's sitting back, relaxed, and then he starts to think, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my next research? And he receives a communication from you, congratulating him on his successful publication and telling him about a service that you provide to help researchers evaluate new areas of research. He clicks on the link and is happy because the system knows what his interests are. The system provides an option to help select a new area of research. The system presents areas of research related to Charles's areas of interest and scores them based on some characteristics like funding potential, novelty, expected impact. He narrows down the options and dives into more detail, like specific institutions that are looking to do more research in this area and well-known authors and researchers in this area. Charles creates a shortlist of 3 research areas, reads some of the essential papers in this area, and goes to talk to his colleagues. Charles selects his research area, and the system then starts to alert him to new articles as they become available. You not only help him in that particular use case, in that particular outcome he's trying to achieve, but you then can also support him through multiple different points across his journey. So we can expect technology innovation to continue to change the scholarly communication landscape. So here are just some of the changes we are already seeing or expecting to see. I think I've actually run out of time, so I won't go into these in any detail, but there is lots of interesting opportunities here for organizations willing to experiment, willing to try and look at what do our users want and how do we actually do that with the technology that's available. So thank you for your time. I hope this has been interesting and useful. I want to say best of luck to all the nominees for the UX Award later this afternoon. We're really proud of our work with Emerald and particularly wish them the best of luck in the award tonight. So thank you for your time.
Sam, that's great. Thank you. We've got maybe 2 minutes for one question. And there's a few questions have popped up. One of the questions I have is, what skills do you value most in the clients that you work with?
I think the thing that we really need and we really want, and actually I think that a role that the librarians can really play is an understanding of end users. It's really interesting that we see, publishers have, and people who provide those information platforms are actually really struggling and historically haven't been very good at getting close to end users. And then we have librarians who are really good at doing that and have an understanding of, well, what are they actually trying to achieve? And I've actually helped someone, I've sat down with someone and helped them through that problem. It's that kind of insight that really drives a unique and high value, experience for those end users so access to that in our clients and is really important. I think a really key role that librarians can play.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time. I'm going to stick to time just because I know people probably want to go and stretch their legs and feel a little bit more less like they're watching TV. Sophie, is that okay? Thank you, Sam. That was fantastic.